Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's class, where we're going to be speaking about something that I don't really find all that pleasant to speak about, and you probably don't find all that pleasant to be in, and that is pain. So, why don't I find it pleasant to talk about? Well, as a chiropractor, I deal with it a lot, right? Patients come in and they have pain all the time. But pain is such a small amount of what chiropractic works with. You see, pain's only about 6% of your nervous system. And how do I come up with that number? Well, we look at the fact that you have two main parts of your nervous system. You have your sensory and your motor, or your afferent and your efferent. So those go out, and we know that it's roughly 12% of your sensory is pain pathways. Okay, so if we take that and extrapolate that down, we say, okay, well, if 12% of that, then we figure it's going to be about 6%. It's actually going to be a little bit less than that even, because if you figure we do have the motor and sensory, but we also have this thing called the autonomic nervous system. This is like your heart, your lungs, your liver, your spleen, things that we don't think about that work automatically. The autonomic nervous system is part of that. It does have some sensory and some motor function to it, but it has other functions too. So let's just call it roughly 6% of your nervous system deals with pain. So, okay, of that, how does pain work? Well, there's a stimulus of some sort, whether that be an internal stimulus, whether that be an external stimulus, whether that be because you burned yourself, you stepped on a nail, whatever the case may be, right? So that stimuli then travels up a delta or Charlie fiber of your nervous system. There's alpha and Bravo, Charlie, delta. And the pain signals or the pain fibers are what are called non-myelinated. What is myelination? Well, myelination, if you think about it, it's like taking a piece of spaghetti and wrapping a cinnamon roll around it. Okay? I know that's kind of a weird image, but it's this swirl around the nerve, and that is an insulative property. Myelin is actually fat, and it insulates it. And so if you have this piece that's there, you have to jump over that. And so actually myelination makes it much quicker to pass signals down because it arcs over those. Kind of like if you're running, right? You're running, you're taking bigger strides. Same with the nerve pathways on the standard sensory pathways. When we look at the pathway of an unmyelinated or non-myelinated, like the delta and Charlie fibers that sense pain, those ones, in order to do that, it has to literally take step by step to go down that same, so heel to toe. So if I had two people and I said to one person, run as fast as you can, and I said to the second person, you can only walk by heel to toe, but I want you to go as fast as you can, which one do you think is going to get to the end first? This is not a tortoise in the hare situation. This is a situation of speed, okay? This is why if you hit your thumb, the first thing you do, recoil, you might say something, right? But you're going to start inherently, or what we call innately, so because it's an inborn intelligence, you start moving your hand, or you grab your hand, or you suck on your thumb, or whatever the case may be. That's because this is called proprioception. That's a sensory pathway that's faster than pain. Pressure, sensory pathway, faster than pain. Moisture, sensory pathway, faster than pain. Okay, so you see where I'm going here. Those are all myelinated pathways, where pain is a non-myelinated pathway. Okay, so when we look at this, I've talked about all of that in the past, so that's kind of a refresh for many of you that are watching this class tonight. Another thing we want to talk about are the different neurotransmitters. So there's two main neurotransmitters that work through the pathways of pain, and that's substance P and, I apologize, and glutamate. Those are the two main ones that do that. Now there's some inhibitory ones that kind of do this. And so if you think about it, when you hit your thumb, does your heart rate increase? Yeah, Usually it does. Well, that's because a shot of something called norepinephrine. Norepinephrine and epinephrine are produced in the adrenal glands. Those are basically excitatory for our heart pathways and things like that. Because if there's pain, we want to get away from it, right? And so if we want to get away, we need to get more oxygen to our muscles, and so the heart needs to pump faster. So norepinephrine is released. This is actually what's going to help to reduce some of the pain as well in our body. And then there's GABA. So I had a patient ask me about this earlier, and that's why I'm bringing this up. So GABA is part of the neural pathways for inhibitory for pain. It does not mean that it completely inhibits, it just reduces it, okay? And the question that was posed to me is GABA the same, like, is that the natural occurring GABA, is that the same, which is gamma aminobutyric acid is what GABA is, or what GABA stands for. They said, is that the same as gabapentin, right? Because we know that when you have nerve pain, medicine prescribes gabapentin. And so, honestly, it is not. Gabapentin, let me see here. I looked it up so I can make sure it's not. It is similar to GABA in structure only, okay? So structurally, it's similar. However, it does not bind to the GABA pathways or receptors that would inhibit that pain in that way. It is an opioid, so there is that to keep in mind. And so that's where it's going to inhibit, is through the opioid properties of it, not through the GABA properties. So if you have more questions about that, the person you should speak to is your pharmacist or your medical doctor, okay? Because I don't deal in that type of stuff. But it's a good idea. No, it is not the same as the naturally occurring GABA in your system is not the same as gabapentin prescribed as a pharmaceutical, okay? So I hope that helps. The one thing that I wanted to talk about in the last few minutes that we have here is the speed. Now, I know I kind of gave that example of somebody running versus somebody walking heel to toe. For my mathematicians or my statistical type people that really like to know this stuff, what's interesting here is, sorry, I want to move my phone so I have everything completely. Okay, good. So I want to make sure I had everything correct here. So a sensory pathway fibers can run as fast as 6 to 30 meters a second. That's how quick they go. Now, yes, your nervous system is actually a lot bigger than you think. It really, truly is. If we were to stretch it out, we're talking miles, okay? Miles of neuronal pathways. In fact, you could go from here in Elk Rapids at my office well to Meyer with one human being. So there are miles of pathways. However, that's if you're taking all of the nervous system and laying it out line to line to line, okay? So to go from 6 to 30 meters per second, that's quite quick. In fact, it's so fast you don't even recognize it. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, if you step in a wet puddle, you'll sense that wet puddle very quickly. Your body recognizes that very quickly. When we talk about, for instance, pain at its quickest on the Charlie fibers, which is the fastest, the delta fibers are the slowest. So at its quickest, it's 2 meters per second, which is 1/3 the slowest to that of the sensory fibers. Okay, so it is as quick, or as slow, rather, the pain is as slow as 0.5 meters a second. So if you're literally 6 foot tall, roughly, let's say 6'2", you're 2 meters tall, it may take a full 2 seconds for that pain from the stimulus to get to the brain to recognize that you have pain. Because it has to travel up that nerve, it has to decussate, which means to cross over, typically in the spinal cord at a certain level, travel the rest of the way up to the brain, and then it goes to the thalamus, hypothalamus, all this other stuff in there. I'm not going to bore you with the anatomy lecture there. but it has to travel from your big toe all the way up to your brain. And so that could be as slow as taking up to 2 seconds for that to actually occur, or as fast as going about 1 second, or about a half a second, depending on your height, right? And depending on where it's at. So it can go quite quickly or quite slowly. 2 seconds to 1 second is pretty different, right? But if we look at it and we say it's 6 meters a second to 30 meters a second, oh my goodness. If you're 2 meters tall, then it can go, the sensory signal can go to the brain 15 times faster. That's insane, right? That's why we do those things of holding our fingers or sucking on our thumb or whatever we're doing, waving our hand around in space, because it is 15 times faster to the brain than pain. This is the biggest reason why I, as a chiropractor, sorry if you guys just got thudded there, I, as a chiropractor, care more about function over pain. Yes, pain is important, don't get me wrong. Function is far more important, because function has to do with all those other sensory options, as well as all the motor functions, as well as that decussation, that crossing over that we talked about just recently, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay? So if you ever go to your chiropractor and they you feel like they've glossed over pain, it's because we're looking at other things. We're looking at functional variables, not just pain. Okay? So I hope this helps you understand pain a little bit better. I hope it helps you understand that why you do certain things when you do experience pain. Okay? And I hope that you understand that I do these classes not just for me, but I do them for you, and I do them for our community, so that our community can be uplifted, can be edified, which means to be educated, and can help each other achieve their best. If you want to know how you can achieve your best, give us a call. Shoot us a comment right below. Something like that. I'm here to help, first and foremost. So if you want to find out how I can help you, and you're not a patient right now, give me a call. Let's get you in as a new patient, and let's figure out how we can help. As always, I look forward to seeing you later this evening and later this week, as well as early next week for your adjustments. Thank you very much, and have a beautiful evening. Bye-bye.